I'm Michal Avram. I'm a senior writer at Fortune, and I'll be moderating this session titled Revolutionizing How We Work. You're getting to see it happen in real time here. I want to quickly introduce our panelists, and I'm going to introduce the ones that we can see on the screen right now. As soon as Ravi comes in, I'll introduce him as well. So Hayden, who's having some audio issues, but hopefully will be all here with us momentarily. Hayden Brown is the president and CEO of Upwork. Andy Cohen is co-chief executive officer of Gensler. Karen Fichuk is the CEO North America for Randstad. And David Kenny is the chief diversity officer and CEO of Nielsen. Like I said, Ravi Kumar should be joining us momentarily. We're going to kick things off in just a minute. I do want to just take care of a few housekeeping notes real quick. Today's conversation is on the record. We're going to be taking questions and comments from in the room. To participate, place your question or comment in the chat function. We can read your question for you, or if you'd like to come on camera and ask yourself, you can click on the Ask to Share Audio and Video tab in the upper portion of your screen. And if the Hop-In gods are with you, we will be able to see you and hear you once we call on you, and you do that. And please make sure to introduce yourself when we do call on you. I want to also introduce another person we have here in the room that you can see on camera, and that's Brian Elliott, the Vice President of Future Forum at Slack. And Brian is actually going to kick things off with a few words to open up this session. So Brian, with that, I will throw things over to you.
Thanks, Michal. So I'm Brian Elliott, and I lead Future Forum. Future Forum is a new consortium backed by Slack that's dedicated to helping companies transform in a digital-first world. We're excited to sponsor the Global Forum overall, and especially today's session. We're all living through the joys of what happened back in mid-March that's carried forward, which is companies made these massive shifts of work into people's homes. Those shifts were possible because of technology advances, shifts around things like broadband access, SaaS tools, and VPNs. But what most companies did was just a lift and shift, taking 9-to-5 office-based practices and moving them into people's homes. A lot of those practices being things that were based really back in the Industrial Revolution. Future Forum itself was based on some conversations we started having back in March with companies that were trying to figure out what more can we do. We're founded on the premise that the challenges that we've been facing over the past few months are actually a massive opportunity to rethink culture and norms that are rooted in 9-to-5 office-based environments, and to figure out how we bring teams together using modern technology to be better. Before we get started, I actually wanted to share a few results that we gleaned from recent research that we conducted. The Remote Employee Experience Index, which is available on futureforum.com, was a survey of over 9,000 knowledge workers taken around the globe. I'm going to share some of the core findings on it. First of all, overall, people's expectations have changed dramatically. Even given all the challenges that people are facing, trying to grapple with, is my camera on, are things working and not? Only 12% of the people that we surveyed globally want to come back to a 9-to-5 office-based 5 days a week environment. Only 16% want to work remotely full-time, meaning never come back into an office. The vast majority of knowledge workers want flexibility. They appreciate the improvements that they've seen in terms of their work-life balance, cutting the commute, even given all the challenges that they've got around this. So they want a hybrid environment, the ability to work from home far more often, but to come into shared space when they need it as a team. This creates a huge opportunity for companies to rethink where they hire people, how you tap into distributed teams, and broader, more diverse talent pools. Companies are already starting to wrestle with, how do I just have a more distributed workforce? What are my flexible work policies? And do I allow for flexibility in schedules as well? Companies that do that will be able to tap into broader talent pools, and those that don't risk losing top talent to people that do. Second, the benefits and the challenges of working remotely are not evenly distributed across different groups. So we measure different aspects like people's work-life balance, their productivity, their stress levels, and importantly, their sense of belonging, which is where the greatest challenge lies for most people. Feeling like you're part of a team has been more challenging. People are feeling more socially isolated. But those differences actually stand out for different groups in different ways. So I'm going to share 3 of those today. First of all, people from diverse backgrounds. Black, Hispanic, and Asian employees in particular in our survey felt that they were far less supported by their managers and by their coworkers than their white colleagues. This is the challenges that we're seeing in society being reflected in people's everyday work. On the plus side, though, Black employees, Hispanic employees, and Asian employees working remotely actually felt a better sense of belonging than they did in the office. For white employees, this wasn't the case. This is a huge opportunity for us to dig deeper and understand what's going on here. But if a distributed workforce and working remotely helps level the playing field, it's an important thing for all of us to learn from. Second, women with children in the US in particular are feeling far more challenged. They're more challenged than men with children in the US, and they're actually far more challenged in our study than women with children outside the US. Whether this is because of lack of childcare infrastructure or cultural norms, you can see the challenges that companies are being asked to adapt to. Whether that's providing services or that's allowing flexibilities, companies are going to have to find a way to address this. It's actually great to hear Anne-Marie Campbell from Home Depot share some examples this morning in session of what they're doing to try to help out. Third, middle managers. Middle managers are struggling. They underperform individual contributors and senior executives in terms of productivity, in terms of belonging, and other dimensions. Outdated management techniques and a lack of tools have actually contributed to this. We're all working in a world now that's competing on the basis of knowledge. Interdisciplinary work is the norm. One of the biggest challenges that we saw, especially in companies that were more tech laggards, was staying on top of my team's workload, being a top issue for middle managers. So what do? They add another status meeting. They cram another meeting into your 9-to-5 day, which actually drops performance, which actually drops productivity, and importantly, detracts from a sense of belonging in your team. We did find some things that work, however. Things that help you kind of blow up your calendar: get rid of the status meetings. Reduce the number of meetings that you've got in your day. Use digital channels, use things like Slack, email, documents to share status and information across your organization. Make it as broadly available as you can. And save meeting time for complex problem solving, and importantly, for social bonding, giving teams time to come together and understand what they're working on and who they are. Second, flexible work schedules. Allowing people to break the 9-to-5 has a dramatic impact in terms of people's work-life balance and stress, but also in our study, doubled productivity and turned challenges with belonging into actual advantages. Today, I'm excited to hear what Michal and the group of panelists is finding is working for them and what's not in their companies. We think the challenges that we're facing today are a huge opportunity. Let's see what the panel thinks.
Thank you so much. And I also want to thank Slack. The session is hosted by Future Forum by Slack. So thank you for making this possible. Curious to hear from the panelists. You touched on a few data points there, Brian, and one of them that stuck out at me is, which maybe is not surprising at all to you guys, but that you basically have a very small minority of people who are at both ends of the spectrum: the people who can't wait to get back in the office and want to be in the office full time, and the people who want to be at home full time and never want to step into an office again. That whole very large majority that falls somewhere in the middle and wants increased flexibility as we come out of crisis mode to whatever the future holds. Does that resonate with you? Is that what you're seeing from your employee base, from your customers, from the data surveys that you've done as well? And if so, how does that change how you meet their demands in the future? I want to hear about this from all your various perspectives. Andy, it'd be great to know how design fits in there. But maybe, Karen, maybe we can start with you. Tell me if this resonates with you and how that reshapes the future if you do need to meet very different, very flexible demands of employees going forward.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, we certainly have, tried to keep a pulse on our employee engagement and taking surveys and asking lots of questions like many of companies out there are also doing. And one of the areas that, we have asked about, just because we have some real estate opportunities and decisions to make in the near term, is this whole idea of how much, do people want to go back to the office, and how much time do they want to spend in the office versus remote work life. And it's aligned to those statistics. I think somewhere between, it is definitely a hybrid model that people are looking for. I mean, they get value out of the interaction, the collaboration, some of the innovation that happens naturally in an and a workplace, but they also need flexibility now more than ever, given some of the demands on both the personal side as well as the work side. And so that leads us to more of a hybrid environment, and we're taking that into account. In terms of our real estate planning, we're consolidating some offices, reducing space in terms of how many people we have to fit at any point in time, but also trying to create the workplace of the future, right? And how can we make it a place where that collaboration and that innovation happens when they're actually together in the office when everybody comes back. And of course, we are getting the help of Gensler, right, as we look at that and plan for the future. So how's that for a nice handoff, Andy?
How convenient. Thank you for that beautiful segue.
I love that, Tia. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Karen. Yeah, we have done a lot of surveys ourselves too right now from what we call the Gensler Research Institute. And our feedback is very similar to Brian's, actually. About 20% of the workforce right now is saying, I could work from home. But clearly 80% in this hybrid mode, which is really interesting. About 30% of the survey, people came back and said they want to go permanently back to the office. And that 30% is mostly millennials. Millennials, more than 50% of the workforce today is millennials. And that workforce, those millennials, they have small apartments, they have dogs, they have parents, they have roommates, and they want to get back to the office for collaboration, for socializing, for bonding, for the whole thing that an office brings to individuals. But clearly the center section, which Karen just pointed out, is this hybrid work environment. And we, as designers of hybrid work environment, we're working on offices right now and reimagining what the future of workplace is and looking at it from a perspective of how you can split your time from home and work at the office. So that means in offices, the open plan that was these wide open workstations before, now we're creating more living rooms and home rooms and nooks and crannies where people can meet collaborating for a sense of choice, conference rooms where you have video screens where you can have collaborations in person, but also collaborating with people at home. So these different hybrid work environments that we're creating that increase collaboration, both internally when you're at the office, but most importantly, be able to work from home 1, 2, 3 days a week in that hybrid work environment.
David, if you could chime in here, I'm really curious to hear, especially from a diversity perspective. I think that obviously the pandemic and this kind of being forced into a work from home situation has exposed so much good and bad. But I think that as much as employee bases had different needs before, again, it just exposes the diversity among our workforces even more so now that everybody's been forced into this. So coming out of it, how do you look at meeting the different demands, and how do you come up with policies that are flexible, at their core?
Well, I think the policies have to be hybrid, as people have been saying, and that's true for our diverse workforce. I would say a number of folks, particularly Black, Hispanic, Asian folks, do worry about social and mentoring, and I think we're having to make extra efforts that are being quite productive to give other opportunities for people to mentor and develop folks and people to build bonds. Our employee resource groups have been really helpful in bringing groups together to share common experiences, not only about the work we're doing, but things that are going on in folks' life outside of work. So many people really struggled with the racial strife. It brought a lot of emotion to the surface the last few months, and we've had to just make sure we leave a lot of room for people to process that. So all those things are important, and I don't think it's just going to be back to work. I think we're going to have a hybrid model for everybody. And what we need to do is bake this in to the way we work. The other thing that was mentioned by Slack at the beginning is that we have a lot of young mothers, and mothers of school-age children are bearing the brunt of what's going on with education. So we're doing a lot to support our on hours. So it can be solved not by trying to go back, but as we go forward, we just have to be super sensitive to everybody and where they're coming from, and make sure we find new ways to give them support and mentoring.
Ravi, I want to bring you in and introduce you. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad it all worked out. And let's just hope that the gods remain with us. Ravi Kumar is the president of Infosys. Again, thank you for joining us. You have really interesting perspectives on this, Ravi, and recently wrote about work becoming more modular, more digitized, and disconnected from an office or a factory. And you think that that will actually open the door to more diverse workforces in rural areas, in urban areas, in different states, different countries. Clearly, you have a lot of data that looks at all of this, given what your company does. So can you just very quickly share what your company does, and then give me in your words, your take on this and the impact long term?
Thank you so much. Are you able to hear me? Because I had quite a bit of technology problems before I got in. Kind of technology is always.
I know where you can find a few good IT people, by the way.
So thank you again. So I managed to squeeze in with another device and get in here. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm the president at Infosys, a global tech and digital services company catering to large enterprises on digital transformational journeys. So thank you for the question. Absolutely. I've written a lot about how digital technologies have a half-life, which is very short, and therefore they're depleting in a fast way. And as they're depleting in a fast way, we have this unique opportunity to not just depend on degrees, but depend on skills and create an inflection point on skills. And if we hope to do so, and the pandemic in many ways has accelerated digitization in enterprises, because we're all living in hybrid workplaces, and we're all living in homes and getting catered by businesses. I would believe that switch from degrees to skills is going to create inclusivity in workplaces, because cost of undergrad education has gone up by 150% in the last 20 years. The second thing which I would believe will happen is work is getting very modular, and as we get to the other side of the health crisis, we're going to see a tectonic shift in the way work is going to be delivered, and jobs and work are going to be disconnected from enterprises, and enterprises are going to become platforms. And as that happens, as work gets more modular, you're going to find full-time workers giving way to part-time workers or gig workers. Today, the gig workers are only in the sharing economy, ride-sharing economy, but you're going to see them in the corporate world. And if that happens, you're going to find another pivot on inclusivity and diversity, because people who didn't have access to work will start to get access to work. One other thing which will happen with virtualization is work is going to move away from rich urban settings to diverse parts of the world and diverse parts of the United States. And as that happens, we're going to get access of work in a more inclusive way as well. So all these drivers and a confluence of these forces, I would believe, are very important shifts, which gives us this opportunity to pivot to a much better inclusive and diverse workplace. If we reset ourselves to the future of hybrid workplaces.
Okay, thank you. And Hayden, can you hear us now, and can we hear you?
Yeah, I've also got a little bit of a special setup, but I can hear you guys. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we're really glad to have you join us. Hayden Brown is the president and CEO of Upwork. Thanks for joining us. And by the way, I do see we have a question from Janine. Janine, if you want to request to share audio and video, I will have you ask your question in just a minute here. So go ahead and do that.
Lost our moderator.
But Hayden, if we can go to you real quick. Does that resonate? I mean, that was kind of a perfect segue to you, given what your company does, and you're dealing with freelancers. I mean, what is the impact here?
Yeah, I think Ravi is absolutely right that this is actually this shift that everyone has made over the last 8+ months to remote work. In some ways, I think there's a huge silver lining that the skills and capabilities that companies are building to work with remote workers actually also opens up access to opportunities for workers all over the world who are not in the urban centers where so many of these jobs historically have been located, but actually gives workers access to opportunities as companies are becoming comfortable with remote work. they can bring in diverse talent, lots of talent that is not, again, historically in those places where companies have been so concentrated for so many decades. And this is a huge unlock for diversity and inclusion. This is an unlock for getting workers off the sidelines and into the workforce in ways that I think is incredibly positive for the economy and for workers who really have been saying, we want more freedom and flexibility. We don't want to be trapped in the 9 to 5 and necessarily coming into some of these, closed office spaces in the same ways. And on our platform, we connect remote workers with these opportunities and have been doing that for many, many years. And we know that workers really want a lot more of that latitude and that flexibility. And so I think this is a capability that is huge for businesses and huge for workers, because it gives businesses access to talent, access to diverse talent, and it gives workers a lot of the capabilities that they want in terms of how to work differently at a time when the technology makes it all possible, which is really, really exciting.
To pick up on kind of the flip side of that, and some of what we're seeing with women leaving the workforce.
Yeah, no, we agree. We're seeing it with our own workforce. We've been able to bring people in to do field work from all over, and many folks that weren't able to live in the big cities around the world we're in. So it's been great. We just need to make sure they've got connectivity, which is what we're experiencing a little bit here today.
And Janine, can you join us if you can and introduce yourself, and you can ask your question.
I almost left. Hi,
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
We
Hi,
can.
everyone. I was wondering, building a little bit on what Brian was sharing earlier, we talk a lot about reskilling, but what about those managers, especially in large organizations with thousands, tens of thousands of managers and leaders, and even the executive team? We are living in such a new world, and we already were before the pandemic, but this has been greatly accelerated. And so are there any concrete ways or specific things that you think that we need to change as executives, leaders, and managers in order to all of the things that we're talking about at this conference? So it may be purpose, well-being, strategy, execution, diversity, just all of those topics.
Well, this is one of my favorite topics, so if maybe I'll just jump in. I mean, I think like many things during the pandemic, this is one that's been accelerated, right? What are the leadership characteristics that are going to take us into the future and resonate and motivate and inspire people in this new normal? And I have to go with my favorite, which is empathy. I mean, I really believe that kind of the profile of the CEO of the past has changed, and that new leaders for the future need to have empathy. You need to be able to relate to all the people that we're talking about, how they're impacted, what a day in a life now looks like for them, what flexibility they need to be successful in your organization. And so I would go with the characteristic of empathy being at the top of the list.
Andy?
Yeah.
And I would add right behind empathy is generosity. Because I agree with you on empathy, but I'm certainly finding my most effective leaders, and where I'm most effective is where I'm being generous with time, generous to really make sure there's always an effort to figure out what someone else needs versus what you need. I think we've got to change the way we do meetings. I think you've got to really make sure you're purposeful when you bother to put people on a screen. And quite honestly, managers have to be servant leaders, I think, to really support people in this kind of an environment. The command and control, let's all take a hill, is not going to work here. You've really got to be generous of yourself to help get the most out of all your team.
I would just add to that, I agree with what both speakers said. I would say that it's also about transparent communication. For my partner and I, Diane Hoskins is my co-CEO of Gensler. We have 6,000 people around the world, and we have really changed the way we communicate with people much more often.
I do think managers are also the weak link in the transition. A lot of workers are excited about this. Not all managers are ready to manage this way. The thing I'm really focused on is how to help our managers know what it takes and what they need to change and decide if they're up for it. Because I do think that's what's going to help make our company stronger. I think all companies got to focus on the management layer. It's the most critical transition to happen.
And Andy, you were saying on the transparency side that is this something that is even, I mean, I'm assuming that that was an element in your leadership before the pandemic, but how has this shifted now?
Thank you. Absolutely shifted in constant communication. So we have broadcasts around the world to all our people once a month. We have created all our thought leadership that's coming out from our practice leads. You know, we're in airports, we're in workplace, we're in retail, hospitality. All our practice leads are putting thought leadership pieces out every single week for our clients. So we have a client letter that goes out to 75,000 clients that talks about thought leadership, emerging trends. So it's not just internally open communication, but with our clients, being really close to our clients, staying close to the latest trends and getting that out to the marketplace in a thought leadership way.
Are you guys still there?
Can I add something there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know, I agree with everything the other panelists have said. I would add a few things out there. I think we're going to move to more network structures versus hierarchical structures in enterprises, and that's going to be that's going to change the way organizational construct is. We used to hire before on IQ and PQ. I call it, you know, intellectual quotient and passion quotient. Now we're going to hire based on IQ, PQ plus EQ, I would call it, which is emotional quotient. Trust will play a very important role because you're going to give a piece of your organization to take away for employees to be outside your organizational construct in physical spaces to their homes. So trust is going to be a very, very important factor. How to build social capital in a hybrid world. We all today effective because we are drawing on the social capital we built when we were in physical workplaces. We're going to, when we move to a virtual hybrid model, you have to draw social capital. You have to build social capital with your employees. We are all social animals. Human beings are social animals. So how do you build social capital in a hybrid world? We have to start to revisit it. So these are the few important things I would like to add.
So, I'm sorry, were you done, Ravi? I didn't want to step in. Okay. So I do want to push just a little bit on this, Hayden. I'm wondering if you could jump in on this question. But it does seem like while on the one hand, you all are talking about empathy, generosity, transparency, and these kind of skills, leadership skills.
Hayden, what should we do here?
David, hopefully your audio and video and everything is good. I hope you're with us.
Yeah, I've got you, Michal.
It's okay. But I'm also wondering if at the same time, if indeed work becomes more modular, if we're relying on gig workers, contract workers more so, it seems like there is something that is more inherently transactional in that relationship between employer and worker. And so how do you do that? How do you reconcile that? Hayden, if you could chime in on that.
Yeah. You've asked such a critical question, and this is something that we have seen unfold on our platform for many years. And what we have seen is our customers have discovered that when they come to Upwork and they find freelancers to work with, they actually build a virtual bench. And that bench is a set of people with whom they actually build trusted relationships. And Ravi talked about this idea that we are social animals. And it's not about, even as work does become a little bit more modular and people go from this full-blown employment relationship to something that does feel smaller and lighter weight and a little bit more kind of tangible in a little bit more of an immediate way, what we've seen is customers build these trusted relationships with people that they come back to again and again over time. And it's not about throwing the work over the wall to somebody who is a faceless, nameless person that is just going to do something and send it back. It is really about coming to someone who you know and you come to day in and day out, year in and year out, and that person knows you, knows your business, knows your brand guidelines, knows your acronyms, knows kind of the ins and outs of how your company works, and yet they are able to work with you and your team and your company in a way that's actually very enduring and very systematic. And so our customers have found that they've built these virtual teams of freelancers, and similarly our freelancers and agencies have built virtual rosters of clients who they work with for years. And so these relationships are actually quite strong and quite enduring, to the point that talking to a recent customer, he went to a restaurant and actually had a meal that was a Macedonian restaurant with his Macedonian freelancer on an iPad, picking the items off the menu for him and saying, oh, eat that one. And they had this whole virtual, conversation there because they had built a relationship, and it was about something much deeper than just, sending the work over to the worker and then getting it done. And so our freelancers and our clients have found that this is much more than just the transaction. They use our platform to find and build enduring relationships that are the backbone of doing meaningful work. And that is not something that has to go by the wayside, even as the world does move forward with a model that is more modular and more dynamic and faster and gives both parties a lot more control and a lot more flexibility than what they've had in the past. And so I think that's the really exciting dynamic that we see and we enable, is really giving people both the control and the flexibility they want, but also an ability to build the really powerful relationships that get the work done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to add, I think if you add on top of that and look at the area of contract or temporary employment, with that, you get a touch component as well, right? So you actually have a recruiter that's working with you on an ongoing basis, helping you with career development, helping you with your resume, preparing for interviews. You do get all of that even in a flexible world of contract employment.
Great. I do want to just remind all of you to please post any questions and comments if you have some, and we will very gladly lead you into the conversation here with the panelists. So I wonder if you all can comment a little bit more, and hopefully we get David Kenny back, by the way, and you're not stuck in some virtual digital black hole, David. But I want to go back to this sort of the balance of flexibility and productivity in this new reality. First of all, how do we rethink how we measure productivity? And I don't know, Andy, if this has any design implications, but I'd be really curious to hear, because this notion of, when you're at your desk, you're performing, like, does that need to completely be thrown out the window for companies that have held on to that?
Yeah, I think there's a definite transformation on how we measure productivity, and those days are, I think, going to be long gone. This is really about content creation, about creativity, about people collaborating together. So the old metrics around productivity are going to radically change. It's in real estate, I'll give you the example. There's a lot of measurements around occupancy and density and KPIs, and we really believe it's going to shift, and it's going to shift heavily again to this idea of ideation, of content creation, and measuring. You will start to measure, I believe, even in as far as a workplace goes, how much time you're spending at work versus how much time you're spending at home, and how much you are be able to get done in this hybrid work environment versus pure productivity of hours and time spent. Definite transformation that's going to take place, and the standards are going to be out the window.
Who else has a take on that? Curious to hear from all of you guys. Ravi, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would just add to what Andy said. We also need to start measuring productivity in context to humans working alongside machines. Humans in the era of AI are not going to replace machines. They're going to actually work alongside machines, or machines are not going to replace humans. They're going to work alongside. So productivity is a combination of what the machine along with you does. And the world is going to switch, I've written about it, the world is going to switch from solving problems at a workplace to finding new problems at a workplace. Problem solving will be an endeavor for machines, and problem finding will be an endeavor for humans. So how do you measure productivity in context to finding larger problems and allowing the machines to solve those problems for you?
Anybody, I'd be really curious to hear from anybody in the room if you're already doing that or looking into ways to do that, to assess productivity alongside a machine. Ravi, is that something do you have? So
we've started to look at it. It's a very complicated process. The fact that AI software still doesn't have measures of being responsible AI and the ability to explain AI, explainable AI, is still a long way to go. The ways to measure it We've done quite a bit on the talent side. We've started to hire from non-STEM backgrounds. In fact, you'll be amazed to know that we hire data scientists from liberal arts backgrounds. We hire data scientists with a background of humanity and anthropology, which we never did in the 40-year history of the company. So we are partnering with schools which actually give us this diverse cognitive, which will help us to hire problem finders of the future. Measuring productivity is always a tricky one. This is an evolving process. I do have techniques to do that, but I don't think we'll be fully there. And this will evolve over a period of time.
Yeah, I was going to say at Nielsen, and I was running Watson before I came here. I'm finding it easier to measure systems productivity than individual productivity. And so, we've introduced a lot more machine learning in the way we produce video ratings every day for what people are watching. And the machines are doing more and more of the work, but we measure the whole system versus individuals. I think it's been healthier. And quite honestly, I think we're getting to better answers by optimizing the system. And sometimes the systems are not just within the company. In our case, our systems extend to, all the media publishers, all the networks and all the platforms. And, I think machine learning and AI are going to help us optimize systems, not just individuals. And we're going to get to better answers when we begin to measure ourselves as teams versus people.
As long as the AI systems don't ask for all the credit, Hayden, let's go to you and then to Andy.
I wanted to build on what Andy and Ravi were saying, which is, I think this is such a great moment of transformation for us to really reframe some of the ideas we've had for far too long about how to measure employee productivity. And really, when you strip away some of the FaceTime cultures that we've had, again, for way too long, and really get back to the basics of what are people spending time on? Are they doing work that really is valuable? And really, as we've exited the offices for this moment in time and gotten back to some of the basics of what's valuable, are people doing things that really matter? This is a great moment to look at these systems and ways we've been measuring employee productivity and kind of stop and say, hey, time out. It's not about FaceTime. It's not about just clocking hours at the desk. Let's make sure people are spending time on high value work that is moving the business forward. And to the extent that we haven't had those measurement systems in place, let's reframe and rethink how to do that and not get caught in some of these legacy traps we've had of thinking that just because someone is showing up to the office, that's really equivalent to adding a lot of value for our businesses. And so I think this is a great moment for us as business leaders to really pause and go deeper here. And if we don't have the systems, let's figure this out. It's a great opportunity for us.
Just one quick addition to it. Sorry, Andy, I'm just going to finish this very quickly. The other aspect we have to start to think about is when enterprise software entered workplaces 30 years ago, productivity with humans was very linear. You put linear effort and you get linear productivity. AI software has no guardrails in terms of value, because if you discover more, you scale more, you are able to explain it, you could get an exponential curve on value. So productivity will move to an exponential curve versus a linear curve, depending on how well humans and AI software can come together. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, I was just going to add, in the design business, we're a global design firm. We have teams from around the world that are working with AI and virtual reality, and it's a tool that's increasing our productivity exponentially right now, where we can work on projects from 5 different countries at the same time. And so the efficiency in the design world and being able to deliver to our clients the expertise from so many different cultures, from so many different perspectives, and disseminate that directly locally to our clients has been pivotal. And so I think the productivity is only going to increase exponentially more over the next 5-10 years. And COVID, obviously, and what we've been through is increasing that, obviously, with more and more cross collaboration around the world.
But if I could add back, though, what I was saying before on diversity, part of FaceTime is the informal mentoring that happens when people are together. I think people can be productive working remotely. What I'm really focused on is, and I think this is on the managers more than the workers, what is the rate of learning of each of your teammates? And if you're going to have to learn in remote ways, how do we set folks up for that? Because otherwise we could end up with some real divergence. And when we're trying to deal with equity, making sure everybody has the mentoring and the tools to learn, I think is key. I think rate of learning is super important to maintaining exponential productivity gain.
Yeah,
otherwise we're going to leave some people behind.
Building on that, David, I mean, one thing we've seen with our independent freelancer base is historically independent freelancers who run their own businesses and therefore basically have to be so current with their skills in order to be competitive in the talent marketplace, in building, their businesses and attracting clients and maintaining, that their whole income stream, is that they have been way ahead of traditional employees in maintaining their skills, in getting new credentials, in continuing to train themselves up on cutting edge technologies and all of those things that really make them kind of the best and the most kind of applicable to whatever's going on, whether it's new AI technologies, data science algorithms, all of the things that they need to be doing. And so I think, if anything, there's something to be learned from independent workers who have been already doing the work of keeping themselves current and actually working, in the case of the Upwork freelancers, in an independent way remotely for themselves out of their homes, out of remote offices and things like that for many years. How can they in some ways be a model for so many of us and for employees in terms of really taking advantage of online learning opportunities and so many other things to really, again, keep themselves current, keep themselves up to date, because what we've seen is independent workers are actually way ahead of in-house employees quite often in terms of the learning curve and being really relevant with their skills and expertise.
I totally agree. It's treating employees like they're independent workers in some ways.
Totally.
Andy, go ahead.
I just shifting a little bit, I do want to talk a little bit about this world, this Zoom world we're living in right now, which all of us have had technical difficulties. And the idea that, this experience is not a visceral experience for people, even if they are consultants or they're independent collaborators. The idea that we still need physical space for people to collaborate in. It's about people's brand identity. It's about culture, the culture of an organization. How do you permeate culture and mentorship of people in this Zoom world we live in? So I still want to advocate that, yes, it's great for the independent worker, but we still need that physical space for people to collaborate, to come together, to socialize, to learn, to grow, is as important as the world we're living in right now. Yes, remote learning is important, but we need that physical, visceral experience for people to come together around.
Yeah, and Andy, that's where, one of the watchwords that we think about a lot for the future is really hybrid. The vision that I have for what's going to happen after this pandemic finally is kind of out from under us and we're living in the new world of the future is really that it will be a hybrid world. It will be a hybrid world of in-person and remote, because we've all gotten this new set of skills, but of course we want to be together in person again. Like, that is something we're all dying for. And so it will be a hybrid world of in-person and remote, I think. And it will also be a hybrid world of employees and independent workers who I think have a much bigger role to play than many, I think, companies have realized in terms of how they can serve their businesses in a powerful way to really unlock their full business potential. So to me, the watchword of the future is hybrid, where it's in-person and remote, and it's employees and independent workers doing incredible things for businesses and for workers.
So, and yes, I do miss wearing nice pants every once in a while, by the way. We have just a few more minutes here before we need to wrap up. So I'm going to end with a question that Brian posted. And Brian, for the sake of time, I'm going to just go ahead and read your question. I hope you don't mind, but it's a good one. To the points around FaceTime and rate of learning for remote workers, are you taking any proactive changes around where and how your executive team works? Proximity to power historically being a means to climb corporate ladders. Karen, do you want to maybe take a stab at that first?
Yeah, sure. Well, we talked a little bit about just staying close, to the employee through engagement surveys and making sure that you have a pulse of the business. I think our leadership team is spending more one-on-one time, skip-a-level discussions. I think, one of the big changes at Randstad, we're in 38 markets and we're a very decentralized organization prior to the pandemic. And I've seen just tremendous collaboration on the global front like I've never seen before. Our CEO started weekly calls right after the crisis started. And in the beginning, it was really just learning, right? What's going on in China and how is it migrating from east to west? And then that turned into a best practice conversation. Eventually, it turned into an alliance that we participated and led with Manpower and Adecco on safely back to work. So how do we help economies and employers get people back to work in a safe way? And now we've continued that. And so I think it's just really opened up, the global collaboration, the global conversation. It's made us stronger, I think, as a leadership team. There's much more understanding of what's going on, kind of around the world. The last thing I'll say in terms of the proximity to management, one of the things that we also started with the social justice movement were open chats, right? I mean, people needed to talk, people needed to vent, they needed to share kind of what they were feeling and what they were going through and how they felt. And I think that for my leadership team, at least, has really, I think, gotten us a lot closer to every one of the employees, which is, a little bit of a paradox given the world that we're living in right now, right?
Yeah.
Great. David, why don't we go over to you real quick, if you can, in 30 seconds, tell us with an eye toward diversity, since that's one of the hats you wear. How are you looking at this career pathing in this new environment?
Part of it is making sure everybody's a little more independent. So a lot of it's been having real conversations with everyone around their aspirations, including the frontline field workers. And I think we've seen a lot of dreams and hopes, and then everybody's got a mentor to help them figure out how to achieve those. But I think putting a lot more power into the organization. And again, this servant leader mindset has really changed the way we work. And a lot of people are ambitiously teaching themselves and learning, and we're giving them the room to go much faster through the org.
Andy, any parting thoughts on this question?
Great. I mean, for us, we don't even have a headquarters. We are incredibly flat and non-hierarchical. We have 50 offices around the globe. Last year, we worked in over 100 countries, and we really believe in communities of leadership. Communities of practice, and our whole structure is based on that, where it's constantly interactive. My partner, Diane, sits in DC, I sit in LA, and our partners are around the globe. And we really believe that's what creates innovation and creativity, is when you bring people from different cultures together, diversity of thinking together, from different perspectives. That's what creates the spark of innovation and change for our world.
Ravi, any thoughts?
Yeah, so, I would agree with everything the others said, but the one thing I want to add is we're going to see more decentralized network structures, even in global enterprises. But all enterprises will become learning enterprises. And that's because, I spoke about it before, when the Industrial Revolution happened, educators educated, and employers employed. And that was a response to a linear problem of industrial revolution, where you industrialize capabilities. With the advent of digital technologies and the inflection point about the health crisis, you're going to find adaptive coalitions between academic institutions and enterprises, and every enterprise will become a learning enterprise. And that is real. We're going to find large enterprises and academic institutions together, defining the reskilling agenda for large enterprises. And universities will no longer look for degrees which are standalone academic degrees. They would look for experiential learning with large enterprises or enterprises of expertise. And that will be the future. So you're going to find adaptive coalitions between academic institutions and enterprises to make them learn.
Great. We are a little bit over time. Hayden, I know I'm throwing this out like as we're over time, and this should not be a yes/no kind of question. But part of the question here, part of Brian's question was about, climbing corporate ladders. And I'm just wondering, and again, in like 5 seconds here, should we just completely be rethinking what it means to climb a corporate ladder in this new environment?
I think that we have seen a democratization with these tools and with remote work that makes it a lot easier to get maybe access to the top. And I think that's a provocative thing that maybe we can end on. What does it mean that we are democratized with these tools, and how can we as leaders access the edges of our organizations differently, and how can those edges access the center? Let's all think about that.
Awesome. Thank you. Great way to end. I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you to Brian. Thank you to Slack. Thanks to everybody in the room for bearing with some of the technical issues of our new age here. But we really, really appreciate you all being here for this conversation and look forward to many, many more, because this is such an important and ongoing and constantly changing topic here. We're going to take a very short break. I'm sorry I cut into some of your break time. Back on the main stage for more discussions at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.